My guest today grew up in Oklahoma wanting to be a dentist, ended up building a business, lost a major contract, turned to a bank for help, and found himself owing over $2 million. Then he declared bankruptcy, and then the federal government indicted him for bank fraud. He thought everything he did was completely legal. He spent almost $500,000 in attorney fees fighting back, and he beat the feds. His name is Ryan Bloom, and this is what it actually looks like to fight with the federal government and win.
I grew up in Oklahoma City in a suburb, Yukon. It's like on the west side of Oklahoma City.
Who'd you grow up with?
So my parents, of course, and I had one sister, Katie, who is 14 months older than I am.
What do your parents do for work?
So growing up, my mom was a teacher and a librarian. So she was always on the same schedule that we were on at school. And then my dad and my uncle co-owned a family electrical contracting business.
That kind of foreshadowed what you would get into in a way, right?
Yeah. I had other interests and just kind of in a roundabout way, found my way, back into the quote unquote family business.
What were you like as a kid?
Oh man, a total smart aleck. Always like having conversations with the adults and, just always in trouble with my mouth. Funny, and just smart, curious, kind of, I don't know, just a normal kid growing up in the suburbs of Oklahoma City.
Did you ever get into actual trouble as a kid?
No, not really. I mean, I made good grades. I generally minded my teachers. I still remember being like a junior in high school and just kind of teasing our pregnant teacher by getting her an "It's a Boy" balloon when we knew she was having a girl. Just stupid prank type stuff, but like never any real kind of trouble.
What were your career aspirations?
Well, so I went to college at OSU and I wanted to be a dentist. And I mean, I got good grades in all the right classes and the entrance exam, and it was really, really competitive. The application season was, because this was like during, the Great Recession. And I got I just applied to one school, got waitlisted, planned to reapply the next year. But I got a job, not working for the family business, but working for an engineering company, and just developed an interest in infrastructure and never reapplied for dental school.
That's a big difference, big change.
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely a big pivot because, in college I was super locked in, studied all the time, shadowed dentists and went on a mission trip in Central America to do dental work. So, I mean, I was like pretty locked in on that. And I just developed different interests and never looked back.
What did your parents think of the switch?
So they were supportive of it. I think everyone was worried that I was going to be way too bored being a dentist. Everyone knew I kind of like to be active and tinker with things, and sitting there crouched over someone's mouth all day long is can be pretty rote. So they supported that. And then also too, it kind of was a time that my dad and my uncle were talking about transitioning the family business. And so when I expressed an interest in becoming the next generation, it was good timing because they hadn't planned on me being a part of the family business, until after I'd graduated from college.
So what happens next?
Oh man. So with the family business, I go to work for, I'm the fourth generation of the family business, and man, just the business boomed big time and really, really grew the company a lot, over the span of a few years. The only problem was the bigger the company got, the bigger the rift between my dad and my uncle got. And they had there was some quiet resentment between the two of them, I think, dating back to early adulthood. And just the bigger the company got, like the worse the relationship dynamic was. And so we were trying to work out kind of a business divorce from uncle, and he went nuclear one day and pushed us all out of the company, and he and my dad ended up suing each other, and it just turns into this nasty, bitter family business divorce. And eventually the company just cratered from all the kind of infighting between the two of them.
So where did that leave you?
Well, I went to work in the oil and gas industry in Oklahoma City. That's big industry. And so I worked for some of the big oil and gas companies, and, was just kind of doing the whole corporate thing for a couple years when I got the opportunity to start my own business.
And what was that business?
So in the spring of 2016, Google Fiber was coming to Oklahoma City. And there was a guy that had worked for me at the family business that came to me and wanted to be partners in an underground construction business to go after Google Fiber. And I was working my job, working for this company called American Energy Partners. We were, backed by billions in private equity. I was led by this, kind of billionaire owner of the Thunder, and just kind of this larger than life serial entrepreneur, Aubrey McClendon. And that's like a big name in Oklahoma City. Well, in early 2016, he gets indicted by the feds for, collusion and bid rigging, pledges to fight it, and then dies the next day in a single vehicle car accident that was ruled to be an accident. But he hit a bridge abutment going, 100 miles an hour in his car, the day after he got indicted. And so at that point, kind of the writing was on the wall that I was really worried that, kind of this unicorn oil and gas startup wasn't going to make it. And so that's why I decided to, start this new venture with this guy that I'd worked with before.
And what's the new venture?
It's called Pathfinder HDD. And it was a company to install, underground communication, later power lines, later electrical, contracting work. But, just like a heavy construction company.
And who are your customers?
Well, so first of all, not Google Fiber. That got canceled. So we never laid an inch of Google Fiber. And we came to work for AT&T, big power company in Oklahoma, OG&E. We did, just a lot of the oil and gas exploration companies. And then there at the end, we really pivoted hard into building electric vehicle charging stations.
So does this business become successful?
Well, yeah, it becomes very successful. So it was like such a grind at first. Like, it was like, are we going to make it, for about 2 years. And then things slowly start to take off, and we had, I think our first year in business, we did 500,000 in sales, jumped up to about 3 million, finally made a big step change up to about a $14 million a year company in revenue, at or around 100 employees, kind of at the peak. Had it sold at one point, had a letter of intent to buy it that fell through kind of at the 11th hour over interest rates. So that was a big gut punch. But yeah, I mean, it was a big success until it was a big flop.
And what happens?
Well, so there's kind of two things. So the, interest rates go nuts back in 2022, and that blows up the deal. We had the company sold for $10 million to a buyer out of North Carolina. And then we kind of pivot and really focus on the profitability. And then the power company lays off half its contractors right before Christmas, because again, they're kind of bracing for lower lower building activity because of the interest rates and kind of the economy slowing into a recession. And so that was just a total gut punch. And I look back and we really should have just closed the business then, like just kind of just taken our ball and went home. But we had an opportunity to really transition into building these kind of cutting edge electric vehicle charging stations. And so we repurposed a lot of our staff into building those. The problem was we went to work for the wrong people. They just hustled us. I mean, they'd convince you on bid day that your bid really should be lower and this is why, and it's going to be so easy. And then they'd pay you for half the project and then just kind of leave you holding the bag on the last half. And when it was time to pay, the check printer was always broken. And there were always delays, and, they'd tell you that you hit a sprinkler line and it was $10,000 to repair. And we did a ton of work in a 3-month span that we just flat out didn't get paid for. And I mean, it was well over $1 million that we just kind of got hustled out of in a short time span. And it just proved to be more than we could come back from.
So your business was that dependent on those electrical contractors or the electric company contractors?
So the majority of our profits came from doing the utility work. And then when we transitioned into the EV charging stations, we were doing work for these general contractors that, generally the power company pays the bill. They expect you to pay your electric bill. They generally pay their bills. But you go to work for these, general contractors. We went to work for this guy, Stephen Osborne, with the Osborne Company out of Topeka, Kansas. And, this guy just hustled us. And you realize that every dollar he doesn't pay you is just money he gets to keep in his pocket. It's profits for his business. And so, going to work for them was just the biggest mistake that we could have made, to not see how risky it was to go from being heavily concentrated on a pretty dependable utility to, going to work for someone that, will just flat out, look you in the face and just stiff you on your bill.
There weren't other utility companies you could have worked for?
So we had a small contract with a power company in Oklahoma. OG&E's massive. So I mean, that's virtually all the power work in the state. We had a couple crews working for a smaller utility, and we still had that going. It just wasn't, nothing was big enough to fill the hole that, that OG&E left behind.
What do you think you should have done differently looking back on it?
Oh, just shut the business down. Just when the golden goose, golden calf, whatever contract went away, we should have just closed the doors and not tried to remake ourselves into something else to keep it going.
But that must have been hard anyways, though, to walk away from something that was once so profitable. Even to get a deal like that on the table, the business has to be doing well.
Yeah. So, when we got the deal on the table, we had 12 trailing months of, $2.5 million in cash flow, so that's what drove, the valuation for the business. And so we'd taken on some investment, and, you wanted to obviously make a return for your investors. And then you've got, 80 to 100 employees that are looking at you. And, you think, you kind of deceive yourself into thinking that you can kind of remake this thing and kind of retool it and kind of have this big second act. That, looking back, it was just a huge, who we chose to do business with was a massive, massive mistake.
So when you switch to these new guys that you're working for that are stiffing you on payment, how are you floating the business? How do you guys pay your employees, your bills, yourselves?
Yeah. So we had been on a line of credit with the bank that would, become the quote unquote victim in this story. But we had worked with this bank for a while, been with this banker, and he pitches to us that we need to go on this business manager program. And it's kind of like factoring your invoices where they buy them at a discount, but it's marketed to us. It's different. It's flexible. You can use it for work in progress. You can go take down these big projects and still have, weekly cash flow to go build these things. This is supposed to be this like working capital, panacea that was going to solve all of our cash flow problems. And so in that spring, we had transitioned onto this business manager platform where we could take draws against these projects to get the cash and the working capital to make the product. And that's how we were able to pay the employees. The problem was when all those customer invoices are coming up 3-4 months down the road, they're maturing in age, and you don't have the ability to repay them because you're filing liens on the Osborne company. You're sending back and forth nasty letters with these guys. You're in war mode trying to get paid and trying to keep this thing going so that you can survive to see this thing through.
What was the interest rate on these loans?
So they buy them at a discount rate, and if you did the math on it, depending on how long they held it for, it amounts to like credit card interest. I mean, so you're paying upwards high 20s, low 30s, kind of on a cost of capital to borrow this money. And so, I mean, it's also just sucking so much off the bottom line. I mean, you truly begin to feel like you as this business owner are enslaved to this product that when it's going well, the bank is, making these exorbitant, fees off of it.
And how much are you receiving from these loans? How much is the amount?
To me personally, or to the business?
The business.
To the business. Okay, so originally you would get about 87% of the value of the invoice, but then as the loan, as the portfolio is deteriorating in value, they're advancing a lower and lower amount all the way down to like 60%. And so that cash flow is really, really getting tight as you're still trying to, make payroll and pay for fuel and materials and keep this thing going.
How much is the average contract?
Oh, these contracts are, anywhere from 80 to, I don't know, $250,000 to kind of a typical project, just depending on how big it is, how many chargers and all that stuff.
How many projects do you need a month just to break even?
Oh, we were trying to, because again, we'd slim down to probably about 40 employees or so. And so I think we're trying to do, 4 to 5 of these a month, is kind of a good clip. Probably 4 to 5, we're breaking even. And, we're trying to get to about 8. 8's like a good flow where there's profit, and it's able to cash flow. But again, it doesn't really matter if you're not getting paid, at the end of the project. You're just like digging yourself a hole in quicksand.
How much would you say you have taken from the banks for these loans?
Well, so the bank never loaned us more than about $2 million at a time. But over the span of the program, we advanced probably $7 or $8 million. So again, they're loaning you this $2 million, but they're loaning it over and over and over again. They're trying to turn that around, 5 or 6 times a year, that same amount of money. And so, at any given time, the bank's exposure to us is, probably in like the $2 million range.
And have you borrowed from them before?
Yeah, we'd done equipment loans. They did our PPP loan that we used properly and had forgiven. We'd worked with them a lot. Had been a pretty healthy relationship.
So everything's going smoothly up until that point. You're keeping it afloat. What happens next when the contracts come to an end?
Yeah, so we quit working with the Osborne company after, a couple months. And I mean, it was so toxic with these guys that there were these projects that we were doing. We were building these superchargers in Nebraska. And I complained to, their CEO and owner. I was like, hey, Steven, you guys have not even paid a cent on these projects. And he writes me back and says, hold my beer. And I check our bank account. He wired us a penny. Like in the Pathfinder operating account, there was an incoming wire from the D.F. Osborne Company for 1 cent.
Why?
To just to be an asshole, to
Why
just
is
give
he
you the middle
stiffing?
finger.
Why are they stiffing you to begin with?
Because they, it's a different reason every time. But, it's, they'd give you this form and they'd say, hey, you have to fill out this form to get paid. Well, then you'd fill out the form to get paid. Well, now we want to take retainage out. Well, we don't have retainage in this It just, these games every single time, and then toward the end, it's really gone sour because we're complaining to their customers. We're complaining to the actual owners of these charging stations. And we're like, hey, we're getting ripped off by these guys. And so at that point, it's just like, it's just this just totally toxic relationship where we're trying to finish because we don't want to give them an excuse, not any more excuses not to pay the bill. But then you'd finish and they would just still, just make up reasons. I mean, just truly like make up reasons to not pay the bill.
So now what's the time terms for these invoice loans? Is it, like say you're doing net 90 on an invoice, is that how long you have to pay back the loan or?
Yeah. So it's like, they can go up to 120.
And so you have to pay the bank back within 120 days?
Well, yeah. And so when the customer pays, that money goes to the bank pays the loan back down, and then you can draw back down on the program again with, new accounts. So
you're in a perfect world, say the customer's paying on time, there's limited amount of interest they can take because it's only that, 25, 30% over 90 days or 120 days?
Yeah.
So like you're limited in exposure technically if everyone pays on time.
Correct. If everyone eventually pays, even if slow, it works. But when the payment stream completely breaks down, that's when the program just unravels. It just spirals.
How long until the banks start asking, hey, where's the money once you miss, say the 120-day window?
Yeah, so here's what's insane is I'm being proactive with the bank. I'm looping the bank in on these issues we're having when the invoices are 35 days old. And I'm telling them, hey, we have issues here. We have issues here. We have issues here. Here's what we're doing. Here's the attorneys that we've hired to deal with these guys in Texas. Here's the same customer. Here's the guys that are handling Nebraska. And so I was super proactive with the bank, like letting them know, like line by line, this is what we're trying to do to get these paid so that we can get, kind of right back side up in this line of credit.
And what are they saying?
It's just kind of like, yeah, thanks. It's not super tense with them. But what they are doing is they're dropping that advance percentage. And so I'm communicating with them, hey, you're starving new cash flow to try to catch up this old problem. We're not profitable enough for you to zap 40% and leave us with 60. There's not enough margin in this business to be able to do that and us to succeed. And then they started doing other things. They would, if they saw that we had just any surplus of cash in our operating account, they would just take it out of the account and just pay it back down. And so there were days that's like, oh, I've got $100,000, to do this with it or take care of this or whatever. And then boom, now it's 20,000 and the bank goes, oh, well, I, used your operating cash to solve this over here. And, it's $80,000 and we just did it.
And at what point are they doing that? You must be late on the payments for them to do that, right?
Yeah, they're repurchasing these older invoices, and it's debatable. Like, you can read the contract. It's debatable if they can do that or not, but it's having the practical effect of just making this business completely insolvent, completely impossible to operate a business with no cash in it. And you're trying to keep this thing going, but they're choking you out. And I'm telling them, like, guys, I'm on the verge of bankruptcy. This business is insolvent. We cannot pay our bills. I'm talking to this banker multiple times a week. His name's Donovan. I'm like, Donovan, you guys are killing us right now. We're not gonna be here. And as the months wore on, like for the last probably 2.5 to 3 months of the business even existing, I'm getting paid nothing. I'm taking nothing from this company. This company is not paying any bills of mine. I'm not getting any form of compensation. I'm literally working there for free. And I'm telling Donovan, I'm going to have to go get a job. Like, this is crazy. Like, I can't keep doing this. And I'm offering him, is wild. I offered them a second mortgage on my house to just give us some breathing room. And they had this reserve account that had over $1 million in it, but they wouldn't let me touch it because every invoice that we're submitting, they're putting money into this reserve account and it's ballooned to over $1 million. And so just imagine logging in, you have over $1 million sitting over here, you have employees that need to get paid, and you're advocating that, hey, this whole thing is about to melt down. This reserve account is way too high, and this is our plan to fix these invoices. And they're just hands up.
Whose money is that? Is the reserve account?
The reserve account, it's so funny. These are like questions that as we're going through this, criminal case, we're answering these questions. The banker was explicitly clear in his 302 that the reserve account belongs to the customer, to us, to the company.
But how does that? I don't get it. They're taking off money on the top and holding it for you in like a savings account, or?
Yeah, in a restricted funds account where we couldn't touch it.
But what is the purpose of that? I don't get it.
The purpose of that is to be to help balance out what they see your collateral value dropping because your accounts receivable aren't getting paid as well. And so they are trying to hold back more and more and more as kind of insurance for them, as a cushion for them, so that if you have invoices that are aging up, they feel good that they've got something there that can take care of those.
So that's technically their collateral to give you loans.
Yeah, it's their cushion, but they have to be really careful because these programs would be charging an illegal amount of interest. So they don't call it collateral. They don't call it, all the normal loan terms that you'd be used to seeing on a typical promissory note. All of those are gone. And they're replaced with all these kind of unique terms that are specific to this business manager factoring, but they don't really call it factoring program.
And how do they get that? Say that $1 million, is that a little bit off of each transaction or invoice?
Correct.
Or are they randomly withdrawing?
No, it builds off of each. Every time you submit an account to the bank, they put part of it into this account, reserve account, and they give you part of it to operate the business.
So it's like what these cash advance apps are doing, like, where you could get like the weekly or biweekly cash advance. There's all these apps. I remember using them when I got out of prison. You'd like paycheck to paycheck, and you can elect to put, say, like $5 or $10 off of each fee or whatever into this rainy day fund.
Correct.
So it's like that.
Correct. It's that just transformed onto the scale of, a multi-million-dollar business.
Now, do they give you interest on that money?
No.
Is that, are they not allowed to do that, or are they allowed? How does that work?
I mean, they keep that.
But you should be able to withdraw it whenever you want.
No, not according to the rules. You gotta understand, this is built to be very, very one-sided. So anything that you're proposing right now that would be beneficial to, the company, that's really secondary to the bank protecting itself. The problem is that they protected themselves, or were trying to protect themselves so much that they literally just killed us. And so this all ends not because the bank had any concerns about how the program was being operated, but because I went to this banker and I said, Donovan, I don't have any more accounts to advance upon. And I could have. If I was a fraudster, if I was what they later accused me of, I had credit availability. I could have faked, hallucinated an account to take an advance on. The company literally ended because I wouldn't do that. And we had payroll, we had payroll coming up. We had bills coming up. I wasn't going to let our employees work endlessly for a paycheck that was never coming. And I said, Donovan, we've got over $1 million over here. I've got home equity over here. I'll do anything to save this business. And he's like, well, just submit for another advance. And I said, Donovan, I'm out of things to advance. I would have to hallucinate something to advance. And we're going to have to wind down the business and go through bankruptcy if we can't get some relief from this crisis that you guys have put us in response to this, unpaying customer. And he emailed me back. I got the email. It's one of the exhibits, and just says like, hey, I'm not loaning you any more money. We're not touching that reserve. And I look back and I really think they wanted the business to fail at that point. Because as we learned later, there's some incentives in it for them if the business failed. And so I think it was just their exit strategy. Our survival as a company, as a business, was not part of the bank's exit strategy at that point.
Is this a small bank or a national bank?
No, I mean, you would call it a small bank. It's they've got a few locations. They're primarily based in Oklahoma and Texas. It's owned locally. So it's, in the grand scheme, it's a small bank.
So do you feel kind of like hoodwinked getting put into this program?
I mean, hoodwinked going into this program is a tiny anthill of grievances I have with this bank compared to the mountain that comes next. But yeah, it was a horrible program for us to be on. It was predatory. It was marketed to us one way, operated another way. And then when it didn't work out like they wanted it to, they fall back to yet another version of how they thought this thing should operate. We were never going to succeed on this program. It was, and again, the things that they were doing to protect themselves were making all of these fixable problems into like systemic terminal problems. And yeah, I mean, they just choked us to death.
Why didn't you look at other lending options at all?
So we were talking to other bankers, as this is kind of going on. And the problem you have is kind of once a business is really in a lot of financial distress, new lenders are just really hesitant to loan money. Bankers don't want to catch a falling knife when a business is really struggling like this. And so it's just almost like when a person is too sick to be operated on. It's just kind of like, man, you guys, what they're doing to you is wrong. And it doesn't make sense from a prudent banking standpoint, but you're so sick. You're so sick. We can't even operate on you. Like you just need to go home and die.
So what happens?
So as like early August of 2023, I announced to the employees that we were winding down the business. We were going to owe them a final paycheck and it was going to be delayed, but I thought I had a solution for that, but I wasn't going to work them anymore. It was like, I wasn't going to keep giving them work to do with knowing that there's an upcoming payday, that was going to be delayed. And so we wound down the business and it sucked. But on my birthday, I went and met with a bankruptcy attorney and, gave him all the paperwork and filed for bankruptcy and did everything he said. He had like really specific instructions on like, how you conduct yourself and disclosures, and just did everything right. Put it all in his hands and dusted off my resume and went and found another job.
Now, this is personal bankruptcy or just the business?
Personal and business.
Why did you do personal?
Because we had personally guaranteed everything.
Even the bank loans?
Every bit of it. Like as a small business, if you want to buy a piece of equipment, certainly this accounts receivable program, all of this stuff, you're personally guaranteeing that. You're personally guaranteeing the lease on the building. And we had trenchers and excavators and trucks and trailers. This is a very capital intensive business. And so personal guarantees are just It's just part of it.
And do you sell all those things and recoup some money, or?
Well, the bank asserted that it had this anaconda lien, that the bank owned everything. And so we disclosed where all this equipment is in painstaking detail. I mean, very, very detailed, in just immaculate paperwork for everything. And the bank is supposed to go pick this stuff up and sell it, et cetera, but they just literally don't do that. And it's crazy. Over a year had passed, and there's this lady from a grocery store in Missouri calling me, and she's like, hey, you have equipment still in our parking lot that has sat here for over a year. I was like, can you send me a picture of it? Because at the same time, the bank's trying to say, and this didn't become a part of the criminal case, but the bank's trying to say that they couldn't account for all the equipment. And I ever send me this picture. There is $250,000 worth of equipment just sitting in her parking lot that the bank is saying is missing, unaccounted for. It's sitting in her parking lot. She sends me a picture. I forward it to my bankruptcy attorney, like, hey, tell these idiots to come get their equipment. Like, this lady's getting kind of frustrated. And then I was like, man, maybe we missed it. Like, maybe it's at the wrong Nope, it was literally at the address that we said it was at. And I mean, even the building that we were in was full of just tools and all kinds of stuff. And again, my bankruptcy attorney was like, hey, just hands off, just walk out the door. I think I did ask, I was like, Jerry, can I take my office chair? He's like, yes, you can take your office chair. That's it. And so I took my office chair and just left everything there. And so even like the landlord, 6 months later, couldn't get the bank to come auction the stuff off. I mean, they just like, they just absolutely did nothing at all to soften their own blow by selling and liquidating. And, you know, the trustee filed a report of no distribution because they told the trustee that they had this anaconda lien that just encompassed and just truly just swallowed up every asset that we had. And so there was no final accounting. There was no final issuing of tax information. I mean, just all the things that you would have expected from a bankruptcy trustee and from the bankruptcy process of an orderly liquidation. None of that happened.
Now, at the time of bankruptcy, how much did you owe the bank?
Oh, all total, probably about between an equipment loan and this program, I'm going to guess around $2.5 to $3 million.
And do they subtract at bankruptcy the reserve account money?
So that was unique. So this account that we couldn't touch, and it was weird, they wouldn't even use it to repurchase old. Like, we had disclosed to them, like, hey, these accounts here, use this money to knock these out. Wouldn't do it. No, we got to have this cushion. Well, then incredibly, 2 days after we cease business, they move over $500,000 out of that reserve account. And tracking that money down on the federal case was fascinating. But so they deduct that. And so we're claiming assets. We had the assets in the bankruptcy, but then come to learn they're doing all their accounting. They're doing all their own self-help immediately in the aftermath of the business being illiquid. And so do we get credit for it? Hard to say. Still yet to be determined.
Now, are you married at the time? Do you have a family?
Yeah. So, I mean, through this, I married my wife, Alicia, when I was 19. And so we have been married for, it's crazy, 17 years in like 2 weeks. And so we're married and we've got 4 kids, and I'm trying to hold all the, trying to find a new job, keep the homestead in the bankruptcy, and just keep going. Like, I think I had maybe 5 minutes of spare time to feel sorry for myself. And then it was just like action, just find a new job, keep going.
How is she reacting to all this? When you have a spouse that is, on the other end of someone's business failing? How does that work?
Yeah, so she wasn't in the intricacies at all of the business. She had mostly been a stay-at-home mom for the last, decade or so at that point. And I mean, we needed money. And she had a friend on Facebook that said, "Hey, we're looking for professional organizers. Come be a professional organizer." And so my sweet wife was like, "Honey, this is like instant. Like, I think they pay you by Venmo." And so she went to work as a professional organizer immediately. Took a couple people on an Uber ride. That was kind of a disaster. And it was just, we got to find a job ASAP. Little cool side note about her organizing thing. She ended up organizing for numerous like high profile celebrities that may or may not play basketball, may or may not be some MVPs of the NBA that she may have organized their shoes. But yeah, so it was just grit. Like it was just both of us, just grit, just grit and just triage and just do what you can today to get money in the door for the family, get a job as quickly as you can. Because again, like I hadn't been paid in months from the business. So, I mean, we are so broke at this point.
What happens during a personal bankruptcy? What do you lose? What do you get to keep? What does that look like? And do you really have like $0 after it?
Yeah. So, there's like a certain amount of what they call exemptions. And so fortunately you can exempt in Oklahoma, you can exempt your home of any value. And that was where most of our wealth was tied up in at that point. And so, if you have non-exempt assets, like it's a bad deal for you because you're losing, stocks or crypto or rent houses or whatever your assets are. And so we're exempt, we're exempt. We have little enough cash that it's like below the threshold that they're, like coming for your cash. And so it's a lot of paperwork. There's meetings. They ask you a lot of questions. Make sure you tell the truth in those meetings. It's very important because, that can spur, criminality. And so it's really, I was really fearful of it. I was always like very anti, like, oh my gosh, bankruptcy would be the worst thing ever. It was nothing compared to what came next. So it wasn't that big of a deal.
And what happens to the creditors once the bankruptcy is finished? They have to stop calling you?
Well, most of them. So, unless they can prove that you obtained the debt by fraud, there's some exceptions, but for the most part, when you file, they can't call you anymore. There's an automatic stay that's put into place. Anything that you're abandoning, like if you were abandoning a vehicle or whatever, then, they're able to repossess that. But if you're going to keep making the payment, you can reaffirm it basically. And then, all those like unsecured creditors, like it was funny too, little things you wouldn't expect. Like, the water company can't collect your water bill for the couple of weeks prior to the bankruptcy. So it's, you get a couple of weeks of free water, but and then they're gone unless they oppose your bankruptcy.
So the bankruptcy is over. You go and get another job. What happens? How long are you in that, like a rebuilding stage?
Yeah. So bankruptcy gets filed in August. I start a new job in early September. The meeting of creditors, like there's a lot of these procedural steps for the bankruptcy that take about 6 months to unfold. But I'm immediately going to work, getting a paycheck, feeding the family. Really landed on my feet with a really great job. It's paying well. I'm able to keep the family life, like we didn't have a grandiose lifestyle, but I'm still able to make the house payment and, keep life normal, for everybody, while this bankruptcy is kind of, winding on in the background. And so, so the bank that, that things obviously escalate with, they wanted a special day-long deposition. And so I go into this deposition with my attorney and their attorneys and this banker, Donovan, and, they just grill me for 8 hours. Okay. Any lie, had I made one misrepresentation in that meeting, automatic felony. And they asked me about all the matters that would later form the basis for the criminal case. They asked me about all those things. And I had a cogent explanation for all of them that later on the U.S. Attorney's Office never could find fault with. They wanted to charge me with bankruptcy fraud, but they never could find where I had made even one false statement despite being grilled for 8 hours by the bank's attorneys about all these matters of the invoices. And so they did that, and then this is where it got really weird. And this is like a loose end. It's still loose. So I'm out at work. I go to work for this company in California. I just spend some time out in California working. And I'm out there and I get this call from my attorney. And he says, "Hey, Ryan, I just got a call from this other attorney named Jeff Love." It's like, who's Jeff Love? Well, Jeff was representing an investor or a business partner that had left. And really his interest in the bankruptcy was just kind of making sure that departing partner didn't pick up any liabilities. And so we weren't really really against each other in this respect. But he's just kind of making sure, that none of this blows over onto this business partner that had left. And so Jeff Love calls my attorney and he says, "Hey, I just want to give you a heads up. The bank's going to let Ryan off the hook. And they're not going to oppose the bankruptcy. They're just going to let it, because it was due to be discharged in like 3 weeks. The bank's just going to let it go." Jerry's like, "Oh, okay, that's unusual. Why are you how do you know? Whatever. Why?" And he proceeds to tell him, he says, "Donovan Reed, this banker that you dealt with, has terminal cancer, and he's not going to live to see this through, so they're dropping it." And of course, Jerry's like, "That's awful. Of course, that's awful." And he calls me and I'm, "Oh my gosh, that's awful." I don't hate to hear that a guy is, I hate to hear that anybody is terminally ill. I was like, "That's terrible. How does he know that? Why that makes okay?" He's like, "I don't know. I'm literally just telling you what I was told." And this guy, Jeff Love, he's kind of slimy. So we're couching all this and is this, what even is this? But then a week later, the bank files what's called an adversary petition. Basically opposes the discharge of the bankruptcy a week later. And Jerry, again, this bankruptcy attorney, calls the bank's attorneys and is like, "Hey, by the way, very weird. Heard this through the grapevine that, what amounts to a key witness is terminally ill. We may need to, depose him sooner than later if this is true." And they're like, "Oh, we've heard nothing of the sort." What? And so I'm asking around because, I know people in the Oklahoma banking community, and people are like, yeah, Donovan is terminally ill. We're like, that is so weird. Never, I have no clue. I still to this day, I think about what led to that just bizarre loose end. Because as you'll learn, the bank did not give up. The bank was very aggressive. And so at that point, if you're kind of tracking along in this rambling, anecdote, we're 6 months post bankruptcy filing. I'm working a good job. The bankruptcy is discharged for everyone except for the bank. And it's set for a November bench trial with a bankruptcy judge. It's totally civil. And it's to, determine the dischargeability of some of these debts. And that's what we're getting ready for.
So what happens? Does it go through or?
No. So we ended up, when the criminal case dropped, we stayed. We were able to petition the judge in the bankruptcy case to stay or pause that case until the criminal case is resolved. And so then actually I don't know, has it been 2 months ago? Probably. The case was reset for the same civil bench trial next February, I think. So we're still, this business has been gone for, this business will have been gone at this point for, over 3.5 years, and still be dealing with fallout, from this failed business.
Now, what happens when it's discharged? You don't owe anything?
Correct. So, assuming that we win the bench trial, which winning a bankruptcy bench trial, that's not like a really high bar. It's not like, beating the feds in criminal court. We feel pretty good about that. But yeah, so if the judge can rule that $1 of that debt is non-dischargeable, that all of it's non-dischargeable, that just anywhere in there they can decide. And then at that point, it's just a non-dischargeable debt that, then you're on the hook to the bank for. You can't get bankruptcy relief from, whatever they determine to be non-dischargeable.
How do you find out about the criminal case?
So fast forward in time, and it's a Friday morning. I'm preparing to go to work remotely. I've got one son is with me in the house. He's laying in my wife and I's bed, I think, because she's gone with one of the kids. They're picking up another kid from camp. And then what's crazy too is our youngest had left like 30 minutes prior to go mountain biking or trail riding. Like, we don't have mountains, but to go trail riding with my wife's dad. And so, it's about 7:30-ish in the morning, and I'm home alone with my 10-year-old son. And Alicia calls me, and she's freaking out. She's like, Ryan, we thought it was my sister pulling a prank on us. And my mom, my mother-in-law, answered Alicia's phone because this weird number from Florida keeps calling her cell phone number. She's like, Ryan, I answered, and he said he was an FBI agent. And my mom just hung up the phone. I was like, okay, that's really weird. And so I look at my phone, and I have a bunch of missed calls, but I like silence unknown callers, and boom, I've got like 14 missed calls from this weird Florida number. And I call the number back. And this voice on the other line says, Mr. Bloom, I'm Special Agent Ben Busick with the FBI. I have a warrant for your arrest, and you need to come out of your house and surrender. And I was like, okay, how many iTunes gift cards do I need to bring with me? Very funny. Haha, is this a scam? He's like, no. I was like, this is the craziest thing I've ever heard of. And my son, my 10-year-old son is like looking at me, and he's kind of hearing all this, and he thinks it's a prank too. And he has like the biggest smile on his face, which just like really breaks me, because like he thinks this is like some hilarious joke that someone's here to arrest dad. And he's like, look out your window. And oh no, and he's like, are you home? I was like, he's like, I know you're home. Who are you? Like, he's like, look out your window. So I like pull back the curtain a little bit. Boom. Here come 3 silver sedans with like, the nondescript plates on them. I was like, what the heck? And I mean, what's going through my mind truly is that like some neighbor has like hijacked our Wi-Fi and downloaded something weird. I mean, that's like, I'm just like, why on earth could the FBI be at our house? I have no idea. And so I call my poor bankruptcy attorney. He's making his money at this point. I was like, Jerry, what the heck? Like, this guy says he's with the FBI, and he was like, well, I mean, check for badges, check for a warrant. Man, I don't know what to tell you. And so this agent had said, come outside and nothing in your pockets, but like you need to have clothes on and shoes. And so I went outside and I opened the door, and there are 6 FBI agents that are ambushing my front driveway. And I'm not saying they had guns. I'm saying that every single one of them is in a defensive position behind their cars. And I am staring down 6, like straight down the barrel of 6 government weapons. And what's crazy is in all of this, I forgot to put my shoes on. And he's like, put your shoes on. And you're just like, what do I do with my hands? And so I put my shoes on, and, you scream, get your hands in the air, hands behind your back, and just runs up behind me, cuffs me, and just spins me around. And I'm headed for this car. And I'm just in shock. It's still like, it doesn't even feel real. And like, if I'm like smiling, it's just like, I still can't believe this happened. And I was like, where am I going? He's like, well, you're going with us. Where? Don't worry about it. Okay. Can I see your badge? And, he pulls out a piece of metal. Can I see your warrant? And what do you check for on a warrant? He had paper with him. And I was like, guys, my son's inside. And looking out the window is this 10-year-old boy who is sobbing. He's in shock. He just you've never seen somebody so frazzled and just messed up as this kid is. And they're like, well, can you call someone to come get him? And luckily my dad doesn't block unknown callers. Thank goodness. Because I call him and I'm like, Dad, it's Ryan. You're never going to believe this. I'm getting arrested by the FBI. Why? I don't know. Where are they taking? I have no idea that either. I don't know anything. I'm getting arrested by the FBI. Our son's home alone. Can you get over here quickly? And so he takes off over there. And and they're not we're not waiting until Dad gets there. We take off. And as I learn later from my son, he goes and gets on Find My, and he's trying to track Dad, through his iPad or whatever. Where on earth is Dad going? And he doesn't know that I don't have anything with me. It's just my shoes. And so I'm sitting on the cuffs, and this agent is like, do you know why you're here? I was like, I truly do not. He's like, well, this has to do with Valiance Bank. Do you know anything about Valiance Bank? You remember Valiance Bank? Just kind of starts this line of questioning. And I was like, I am in shock right now. He's like, well, do you want to talk about it? I was like, you know what? I've seen enough cop shows. No, I don't. I want a lawyer. He's like, you sure? Yeah, I want a lawyer. All right. So we're driving down the road in the back of this car. And it's so weird because he and the guy driving are really uncomfortable in their bulletproof vests, which I thought was weird. I was like, don't FBI agents arrest people all the time? Aren't they in bulletproof vests all the time? As I learned, this is actually kind of unusual that they're, doing this in a, gated suburban neighborhood. And I have no violent history. I don't own a gun. They released me that day on a $5,000, signature. I was on a flight risk. I could fly anywhere in the country pre-trial. I didn't even have to ask permission. I should have told him I was going to be gone. And so I still to this day have no idea why they did this, raid, why I got, kidnapped by my own country. But these guys are anxious to get their vests off. They pull over. They just reek of body odor. I could still smell the body odor. And I'm like, hey guys, I'm not sure I'm going to have wrists. I think my hands are probably going to fall off at the end of this deal. Is there any way I could not be sitting on these cuffs? They're like, yeah, if you talk. I was like, man, that cop show, that cop show. All right, suit yourself. I was like, all right, listen, I just want my hands back. So yeah, I'm good. And so they, get me out, get my hands in my lap. And this FBI agent just proceeds to tell me, listen, Ryan, you never did a project in Nebraska, did you? I was like, what? What do you mean I never did a project in Nebraska? Yeah, you never did a project in Nebraska. In Omaha or Lincoln, did you? You just made those up. Are you kidding me? He's like, what? Who could I talk to about this? And I'm giving him witnesses. And like, what's crazy is like, we got this in discovery. I get this like little hand scratch list of like people to talk to that the defendant gave me. And he's got like these invoices and he's just like, yeah, you didn't do this job. You didn't do this. I was like, yes, we did. Like, what world do you live in? And so I just start, according to my attorneys who listened to the audio afterwards, I just started cross-examining him. I was like, man, did you look at the liens we filed? Did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? And finally, he gets tired of answering questions because I'm interviewing him at this point. And he's just like, listen, man, if you're not going to own this, like, I'm just taking you downtown. All right. So he takes me downtown, and to bring the Donovan story sort of back to loop, I was like, hey, by the way, I was like, I saw on LinkedIn like 3 days ago that Donovan is working at a new bank now. We had heard that Donovan was like really sick. Is he okay? And he looked at me, and I realized it was the look of the fact he didn't even know who I was talking about. Because as I'm about to find out, he got this case a week ago and made a few phone calls so he'd have something to talk about with the grand jury before the indictment. He has no clue who I'm talking about. And he's telling me, we could have gotten you for money laundering. We could have gotten you for bankruptcy fraud. Does your wife know that she's married to a swindler? Just stupid stuff. And I'm not taking the bait. And so, they drive me underneath the U.S. Marshals there in Oklahoma City. And I get processed.
What do you get formally charged with?
So I got charged with 18 USC 1344 bank fraud.
Just one count.
One count of bank fraud.
That's how you know they don't have much of a case, because normally they charge a lot.
Well, they got there. Don't worry. We got to a superseding indictment. But yeah, I walk in there and I'm staring down the barrel of there's a 30-year max on this single count. But, from a sentencing guideline standpoint, depending on what they do with enhancers and whether you plead or not, this was like a 5 to 7 year kind of sentence I'm staring down the barrel of.
So what happens next? You get released, you sign for the bail.
Well, yeah. So, they appoint a public defender. I didn't have one. I hang out in a jail. It was crazy because it's like, hey, can I use the bathroom?
Yeah.
It's like, is that the men's room over there?
Oh, I thought you were just asking me to use the bathroom.
No. Like in the Marshals, I'm like, can I use the restroom? And I'm thinking they're going to take me to and they literally fling this door open, and I am now in a jail cell with 4 dudes, and there's a can in the corner. And I was just like, and fingerprinted, mug shots, cheek swab. We're in there. I'm like in there telling stories with my new U.S. Marshals, bunkies for the day. And, finally I'm shackled all day, and then they chained me to my waist, and, I'm still wearing like athletic shorts and a t-shirt. And it was kind of funny because I'm sitting there processing this out loud with my new friends here at the Marshals who are getting sentenced for drive-by shooting. And I was like, why did they arrest me? Like, did they think I was going to run? And this one kid in there, and I just got to deliver it to you the way it was delivered to me. He's like, with all due respect, sir, you literally look like you about to go for a run because I'm wearing Nike sneakers. And I was like, you know what? That's actually a really great point. I appreciate you for letting me know. So, I go get arraigned. It's crazy. I remember the public defender is like showing me the sentencing guidelines as I'm about to hear my charges read out. And she's like, hey, I got good news. He's going to say you're facing 30. You're not. Probably just 5 to 7 years. I was, what? I'm supposed to be at work today. My dad's out there. My dad had figured out where I was at, and he's there. And, they don't oppose my release. And I sign and, go get in the car. And my dad, he's a saint. He's got like 3 Diet Cokes waiting, Advil, cold and he's ready. And I get my phone, and so I pull my phone up, and I'm just like, man, like, is this on the news? Like, what is this? And I mean, boom, Ryan Bloom indicted for bank fraud. I was just like, oh my gosh. I couldn't, I went home and it just felt like the world had ended. I woke up and it just still could not believe it.
What about your job?
So it's Saturday at this point, and I'm like, I gotta tell them immediately. They're gonna fire me one way or the other. And actually, this was the second company I'd gone to work for in California. I actually got laid off from the first company when Tesla charging blew up. But I was at a new job. I'd only been there for like a month. And I wrote this email it's a big company, but I was brought in to like start this new department of the company. So, I'm like kind of reporting in a dash line to the owners. And I send this email and I was just like, listen, guys, I was raised like you guys were. And here's what happened. I'm in shock. I had no idea this was coming, and I respect your decision all around. I'd hope you'd give me a chance. And so they called me the next day, and like one of the owners of the company was like was a big time mayor in Southern California for a while. Like, this is a very influential family, very well established company. And I just spoke from my heart to all four of them about what this was, what it meant, how I intended to fight it. And they said, okay, well, we're going to take this under advisement and we'll get back with you. And I just thought, there's just no way. Like, who in their right mind would keep this much baggage, around? And they called me like an hour later and just said, hey, we're behind you 100%. And we know that even innocent people sometimes take deals, and go do what you got to do. Go do, and we're behind you, and get to work. And so I had that job the entire time I was dealing with the feds. I'm still at that job. And, I get overtures a lot because I'm in a very niche industry. There's a lot of need for people that have really, that really specialized knowledge. And it's like, we're not even having a conversation. Like, these guys saved my life. Like, that whole story, this story does not at all go like it does at all without those guys having my back. It was everything.
What about family, friends, neighbors? Do people kind of look at you differently, or do they, leave you in the dust when this is going on?
So I was like shocked. Nobody ever was ugly to me. And we had some family that I think had so much of their own anxiety about it that it made it hard for them to be there for us in our anxiety. But I think it just was a lot for them. But I mean, my parents, my wife, my kids, we're updating the kids. I'm talking about it openly with lots of people at our church. And no one ever said anything bad about it to my face. I never felt like rejected or shunned or like put down by anybody. There were some people that maybe I would have expected to be right there in it with us that were not able to be right there in it with us I don't think it was anything to do with like rejecting, us. But other than that, it was just this incredible support. When it was headed to trial, we had more people wanting to come than would have been helpful. Like, I was having to like tell people that hey, you can come once, kind of deal. But we had incredible support. We had people that we could have eaten a home cooked meal. We could have had a meal brought to us every night for 18 months if we had asked for it. We had that much support from the church, from friends, from family. The only downside was we're in this pretty small tight-knit school community, and there was a lot of gossip about it. There was an incredible rampant sharing of this link to the justice.gov press release. So the day after this happened, Trump got shot in the ear, which just dominated the airwaves. So it didn't really get picked up by like the news stations, but it spread because people were texting each other the link. And so there's people that would have said that they were our friends that I would say I feel betrayed by, because they're just sending this thing out. I mean, it spread like COVID that weekend. And even like the worst was people that I knew, but they're like, hey, how's life? It's like, oh, it's good. Just going through some trials and tribulations. You know, right? Know about what? Come on, you know, I don't know. Maybe I heard something that like, maybe did you get indicted? You know, it's just like, guy, so there was a lot of that.
And then in the press release, they say how many years you're facing, and
Yeah.
people think that you're going to
Yeah, and this guy's a scumbag, and he's the worst, and we hate him. And
I still get messages in my inbox today with people they're like, oh, aren't you still in jail? Because the press releases say facing 120 years because they add up each count.
Heck yeah. Yeah, this guy's going away for life. And so we had a ton of support, and I mean, my parents were unwavering. I mean, I could show up at their house with no notice and just unload on them updates, strategy. I mean, whatever. Like they were like on the trial team, and they were just right there with it.
So how does the legal process play out?
Well, so that's July, and it's just like so funny because, you know, just these prosecutors. They're like, oh, this file's been building for months. It's like an iceberg. We're going to have you this just massive stack of discovery on Monday. Monday comes and goes. And then like 3 Mondays come and go. It's like a month before we get anything. And they give us like 4,000 exhibits. And they're all from the bank. Like we've seen them before. They're all from the bank. And then, you know, a few random 302s. And truly, the FBI did all of the investigating after the indictment. So they roll up, find some disgruntled former employee, family member, track down my uncle from a decade prior to get his, you know, gloss on the whole thing. And they've all seen this press release. And they're all, I mean, it's just incredible. They're just parroting the press release. None of them were there at that time. And I mean, it's crazy, the stuff that I'm getting back in these 302s. Like, one time I bought a Jeep and I took it to an off-road park. Paid my money, went to the off-road park, got a few scratches on the Jeep. That's what you do at an off-road park. The FBI 302 said that I bought a Jeep and trespassed and tore up private property and destroyed the vehicle. You're like, what? What? Are you kidding me? And then somebody else was like, yeah, you know, one time he paid an employee to bring back some unknown specimens, an unknown box of contents from Mexico. Like, I have no clue. If I've ever paid someone to bring me a box, it's UPS to ship me a package. I like just the craziest stuff. But the uncle was probably the best because he like came after my mom. Like, your tax dollars paid an FBI agent to go get dirt on my mom. And so it's crazy because when I was in college, my dad came to us. He was like, hey guys, I think we should get a lake house. Like, a lake house? Dad, are we that rich? Like, we can get our own lake house? Because there was like a family lake house growing up that was old and, you know, kind of run down. He's like, well, I think we should get our own. Dad, how do we get a lake house? Well, my aunt, Janet, had stolen almost $200,000 from her dying mother. And we never knew if it got blown on drugs, gambling, shopping. We don't know where the money went because it disappeared very quickly. And her siblings had caught on to it and came to her and said, hey, you've got like a month to pay this money back or, you know, we're going to have you prosecuted. So my uncle, my dad are business partners. So my uncle comes to my, you know, dad and is like, hey, I need money in a bad way. Well, you know, they're business owners. So like, if you take money, you take money. So we got a whole stinking lake house when I was in college. My parents got a lake house in college with the matching funds that uncle needed, you know, to get, you know, my aunt out of trouble. They go find this same uncle. This guy And this guy has all these big, loud opinions about the moral compass of the family. My mother was an enabler. My mom taught me how to scheme. Like, it was this all-out assault, that I was a ship without a compass and I lived in a wicked Machiavellian triangle of deceit and lies. It was just like, what? I haven't talked to this guy in over a decade. And wait a minute, hold on. Whose wife stole from their mother? Like, it was just like crazy that like the FBI wanted like family tea in this federal prosecution. And so I'm just getting all these 302s. And there's a former employee talking about how the company was struggling and I bought a Tesla Cybertruck. And my lawyers came back from this meeting and they're like, hey, dude, what's up with the Cybertruck when your company's struggling? And I was like, guys, Cybertrucks didn't exist. No one had a Cybertruck in January of 2023. Elon Musk didn't have a Cybertruck then. They weren't available for over a year. But here comes this 302 confidently stating that I was cruising around in a Tesla Cybertruck. And like, it was like Truman Show stuff. And there's this project where they're like, yeah, and we talked to this guy and like, you guys never even contracted with them. I was like, didn't contract with them. Here's the DocuSign purchase orders. Here's the photos of our crews on their job sites. Here's this, all these artifacts. And they're like, this is crazy. This doesn't happen. This is, we have two totally different stories. We go talk to the prosecutor and the FBI and it's this, and we come in here and it's this, but weirdly they're just talking and you have like all this evidence. Because again, to reiterate, every single transaction I did with the bank, I had proof and artifacts for. I had evidence from the past underlying every single transaction we ever did. And they're saying that these were just hallucinated invoices. And so they said, well, why don't we sit down with this prosecutor, kind of go through these, and we need to shrink this thing down. Because right now, you're facing, multi-millions. I wonder if we could shrink this thing down a lot just by talking with this guy. And so they set up kind of what amounted to like a burden flipping deal where we kind of had to like prove that things weren't fraudulent. But we participated in it in good faith. And my attorneys at that time, they were very smart, very like street smart. And they're like, let's go through half. Let's see what this prosecutor does. Is he going to be reasonable? And if he is, we'll move on to the second half. But if not, we're wasting our time and we just need to go see a jury. It's like, all right.
So what ends up happening?
So that happens in November. And leading up to that, I went out to job sites of ours that I'd never even been to. And they were like, oh, this guy committed fraud by saying that they dug in rock. And the client says there was no rock there. Oh my gosh, I billed for rock because the foreman wrote rock down. I don't make this judgment call. And a buddy of mine from church, I'm like, hey dude, I got some shovels. Let's go. And we drive out to rural Oklahoma and dig up rocks. Just literally out there, just digging a hole and taking a video of it and making rock bags to bring to, these meetings. And so my lawyers have this first meeting with the FBI agent and with D.H. Stillbeck, the prosecutor. And this FBI agent is just like that caricature of just government incompetent buffoon. Like, this guy's supposed to be investigating a white collar case and he doesn't know what a lien is, talking about a white collar case, and doesn't understand statements, doesn't understand accounting, didn't know that more than one invoice could be paid with the same check. Just the most basic stuff. And he'd say things like, well, now at the risk of sounding dumb, and then he'd ask a question. They'd be like, no risk there. That was incredibly dumb. And this guy, he's not asking the right questions. And then even like, we got this in discovery later, he's asking the bank questions and the bank is emailing between themselves, complaining about how dumb this guy is. And they're like, either this guy's testing me or something, because I've explained this to him 10 times. Does he really not get it? And so you just got this like just kind of this like just totally incompetent FBI agent that knows which flavor crayon is best. And then you've got this AUSA that we dismantled every single one on the list. And then at the end of that, after a couple months of, follow up, checking stuff down, he just comes back and it's just like, well, listen, as long as these are unpaid, it's fraud. It was like, he conceded this, but he's basically like become a debt collector for the government. And so, it's just like, this isn't going anywhere. We're not going to go on to the second half of the list. This guy's not bending at all on the first half of the list. So it's like, all right, like we got to get ready we got to go to trial.
No, you said they superseded you. What else did they charge you with? Just more bank fraud or?
Well, yeah. So in early March of 2025, I'd done a ton of research about how close of a relationship this prosecutor had with this victim bank. And I was out in Las Vegas, which nothing good happens in Vegas, but I was out in Las Vegas at a work convention, and there were some guys there that my company had done business with, but like they weren't witnesses they hadn't been witnesses. So I felt, safe to talk to them. But, I went up to these guys and they knew who I was. They knew what we were talking about. They set up the breakfast, but I explained to them this conflict of interest between the prosecutor and the bank that I'm happy to, go into more detail about. Well, after that meeting, they called someone who called the FBI who said, Ryan Bloom's out in Vegas throwing around all sorts of craziness. And my lawyers call me and they're like, hey, dude, like shut her down. You need to get home right now. DH Dillbeck is threatening to revoke your bond because you're out in Vegas, threatening witnesses. I was like, what? And so they passes or so, and they're like, okay, Dillbeck wants you to agree to a change in conditions, no contact, like total gag order. Like you can't talk about this case with any would-be, like any would-be witness you cannot have any contact with. To me, for retaliation for pointing out, a case of, potentially, soft corruption that is the foundation of this case, it was retaliation on his part. It was to silence me for pointing out a major, major issue that he had. And so, I was like, well, what if we don't agree? It was like, well, then he's going to try to revoke your bond. We're going to have to go have this whole hearing with the judge. It's not going to, this is not the battle that, that you want to fight. And by the way, he's doing a superseding indictment, and it's going to be 10 counts of bank fraud. He's picked his 10 favorites. He's picked out his 10 favorites and he's going to recharge the indictment with 10 new counts. He's like, but if you agree to this, he's not going to come after you for, obstruction of justice. I was like, that's crazy. Why would he can't come after me for obstruction. Like what? That's insane. Like I had a fruit plate with this guy. It's like, all right, whatever, we'll acquiesce, for now. And so, that's kind of how the superseding indictment came out. But when it came out, it did have the witness tampering, obstruction of justice.
Do they offer you a plea deal at all?
Well, so jumping way far ahead in the story, well, so funny. We get these emails between AUSA Dillbeck and the bank, and he is just like assuring the bank that the plea is coming soon. The plea will be here any day now. We're about to start having the plea discussions. This guy's cooked. Update your board of directors. We got this guy. All that's left is for us to figure out what the restitution's going to be. And meanwhile, we're not having any plea discussions. And so I had, by the time a plea discussion finally happens, it's like a week before the trial, maybe 2 weeks before the trial. I had new attorneys at this point. And they forward me this email. They're like, Ryan, we just got this out of nowhere. And it's a completely signed, executed by all parties plea agreement. Everybody has signed it except for me. And I wrote them back. And the first thing I said was not very polite. They're my attorneys. So, this was in the brotherhood. First thing I said was not very polite. The second thing I said was, you are not even authorized to reply to his email. Don't acknowledge receiving it. Don't engage with it. I'm not even willing to spend 1 minute even letting him know that it made it to us. Those were the plea discussions we had with D.H. Dillbeck.
How much? What was the offer for?
To drop the witness tampering charge and to reduce it to one bank fraud count that he's then just going to try to turn around and use relevant conduct to push the sentencing guideline, up into the I don't know. He told my guys before that if I pled, he'd advocate for like a 3-year sentence or whatever. And I was just like, no, like we're not engaging with this.
Now, who tipped them off? It was the bank that called the FBI?
Oh. So going back to around the time that they're deposing me, the bank files an insurance claim with Insurica. So banks have insurance. You know what they have insurance against? Fraud. Banks don't really have insurance against messy civil disputes. They don't really have insurance against contract disputes. They don't really have insurance, when like when a deal goes bad. But they do have fraud insurance. And so the bank files I think they were asking for like $2.5 million from Travelers Insurance on their bank fidelity bond. And the whole basis of the claim was that, a bank customer had committed fraud upon the bank. And it was basically like the indictment language. So they filed that insurance claim in December of 2023. Like 2 days later, they call the FBI.
The insurance company? Or
no, the bank calls the FBI like 2 days later and just regurgitates everything we've been defrauded. And incredibly, it just immediately lands on D.H. Dillbeck's desk. D.H. Dillbeck, before and since, has never prosecuted a bank fraud case. He's a relatively new prosecutor in the office. And at that point, he'd basically been doing, sex crimes, guns, drugs, kind of that type of work. He hadn't really been the lead on like a fraud case. But this thing lands, and it's not with the AUSAs that normally run the bank fraud cases. It's with D.H. Dillbeck. And it's just live on immediately. And there's no statute of limitations. There's no timeline. There's no need to rush. But it's instantly. It lands at the FBI and Dillbeck is assigned. They've opened up a parallel investigation. Like it's headed for indictment. It's live. There's no decision to be made. This case is going to be prosecuted the second it lands at the FBI.
Did the insurance ever pay out the bank? Do you find out that?
Yeah. So they denied the claim in January of 2025. 6 months after I was indicted. And their denial was just that, the fraud had to be committed by an employee of the bank, not by a customer of the bank, which was like weird because that seemed clear to begin with. But what's weird is in the denial letter to the CFO of Alliance, he references all these conversations they had over the course of 13 months. Like this claim was pending for 13 months. Like that seems like an awfully long time. And yeah, and hey, we appreciate all the supporting documentation you've been sending us. And so we'll get there in civil discovery on the adversary side, but it is like very, 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 seems very obvious to me that the indictment, the press release, that all of that was to bolster and to legitimize this this, because obviously there was a decision to be made if insurance was going to pay on this or not. Why else would they take 13 months to issue a denial, on this bond? I mean, it just seems so obvious to me that the insurance played a huge role in why it was indicted so quickly. Just just YOLO. Like they just YOLO'd on this one, threw caution to the wind, no target letter, no investigation, just indict the guy and we'll clean it up in post. And it was just such a rush. I mean, they just had no time to do anything. I mean, like I said, we got emails where the bank sent this FBI agent that actually testified before the grand jury. He got all the bank's files like 2 weeks before the case was presented to the grand jury. And he just called 2 or 3 witnesses. They're like, yep, fraud. And boom, walks in, has something to say to the grand jury, walks in, gets the indictment, and cuffs and stuffs me 10 days later.
So what happens? Do you make it to trial?
So kind of, going back to when the superseding indictment comes out, I hired new attorneys. And so I really felt like my local guys had kind of done a good job keeping it warm, but I did not feel good that we were really preparing for a trial. We needed to be filing motions and we needed to be doing our own independent discovery. Like we're putting on an affirmative innocence case here. Like we're going to put on a more detailed case than the government was prepared to put on. And it just seemed like the work and the time wasn't going into it. And, these local guys, I mean, they're bailing people out of county jail all the time. They don't sit down and focus on one case. It's just kind of this churn. And so I found these really, really awesome attorneys out of Nashville, Tennessee, called Litson. And actually they gave me this t-shirt that says allegedly on it, that I thought was appropriate, to wear today. What's funny is I was trial prepping and I made the receptionist like, hey, can I get one of those t-shirts? And Alex Little came in and he's like, wait, what are you doing with that? Like, what are you doing with that? I was like, oh, well, and like the receptionist is just like, oh, like, yeah, like the client asked for one. He's like, listen, dude, do not put that on until after we win trial. Like, period. Like bad juju. If you got photographed in that would be horrible optics. You can wear it all you want after you win. Okay. So, got to wear that. But, so I hired Alex Little out of Tennessee. And I mean, that was just like calling up family members and borrowing against my house that I'm now having to sell to pay them off because they're not in a position to just give me money like what it took. I mean, it takes hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, people spend millions to get a top-notch white collar defense counsel. But so I brought in Litson and they were just incredible. And there's this new to the office. Now he's a partner named Ted Cantor. And I mean, Ted was just destroying Dilbeck on motions and just pinning him in and locking him down on all these pretrial motions and things. But they raised the concerns about this conflict of interest to DH Dilbeck. And he was just like so weird about it. And like, they just like, he creeped him out. Just didn't feel like they were dealing. Like they said, I felt like I was interviewing a witness. Like I felt like I was interviewing a hostile witness. And these guys are former AUSAs. Like Ted was prosecuting cases one week and then he's working on my case his first week, at Litson. They're like, man, this is just so sketchy. And so basically what had happened was what got me, what I talked about that got me silenced, by Dilbeck was, so Dilbeck's a prosecutor. His wife was working for the OU, the University of Oklahoma College of Law, 10 years ago, doing like social media, marketing, whatever. She's making $50,000 a year. All this stuff is public records. So like, this isn't some fringe thing I'm pulling out. Like these are like public records. But her boss is this kind of larger than life university, or the dean of the College of Law, Joe Harris Jr. And Joe Harris Jr. Is now the president of OU, and he also happens to be one of the founders and shareholders and directors of Valiance Bank. So he's got this private investment in the bank, and then by day, he's the OU president. Well, in 2020, he becomes OU's president, and he takes Mackenzie and 3X's her wages up to about $150,000 a year, which is like an incredible promotion to be making $150,000 a year, like 3Xing your pay. Well, then he becomes the permanent president, and he gets her off of those poverty wages of $150 and gets her into the real money. And I'm being very cheeky when I say this, gets her up to like $250. So I mean, I'm sorry, like $250 in Oklahoma that's 500 on the East Coast, maybe more. This is good money. And so it's just insane to me that Mackenzie Dillback has had this just huge trajectory directly working for Joe Harris. He's the one praising her publicly. He's the one promoting her. He's the one recommending her. There's all this trail of evidence that Joe Harris has been very, very influential in the Dillback household, going from $50K to $250K. But like that wasn't enough. Right before the superseding indictment was to come out, Mackenzie had left briefly, came back to the university at like $210 a year, which is still an insane amount of money. And Joe Harris, in March of 2025, at the same time that Mackenzie's husband is aggressively trying to nail me to the wall for bank fraud, Joe Harris recommends her to the Board of Regents for a raise of $100,000 a year to $310,000, while her husband is ramrodding a weak case, a fast case, trying to like get this quick and dirty prosecution benefiting Joe Harris's bank. And so he had told my attorneys that he was going to consult with like the advisory group within the DOJ. Had told the previous attorneys. And this is what I laid out in Vegas that, got me in so much trouble. But he had told my previous attorneys that he was going to consult with PREO, which is like Professional Responsibility Advisory Office. I don't know, botched that, but it's like the DOJ, like ethics, kind of consultant group. Well, then Alex and Ted, this is so funny. They're like, hey, DH, did you talk to PREO? He's like, well, I'm just going to give you the answer that what I'm supposed to say. They're like, what do you mean? He's like, well, yeah, like you guys were AUSA. He's like, what to say if someone asks, if you consulted PREO, right? And they're like, DH, our ethics were never called into question as AUSAs. We have no clue what it looks like to call into PREO. And so it turned out he didn't. He just didn't. He just, he didn't do that. And so it just was so creepy. So we're getting ready to go to trial in September. We've kind of got it all ready to go. And, we had to put on, we couldn't defend part of the charges without bringing in the Joe Harris, Mackenzie Dillback, DH Dillback situation. And so my attorneys issued a trial subpoena to Joseph Harris Jr., the president of the University of Oklahoma. And he was to bring employment records, tickets to the suites, any kind of perks, whatever. But Valiance's attorney said, well, I'll accept trial subpoenas for every witness on your list, but not for Joe Harris Jr. We're like, all right. So we had hired, Alex has this retired DEA agent from the backwoods of Tennessee. And listen, he's used to rolling up on people in South America. I promise you, he can find you in Norman, Oklahoma. And so Joey is like, he's going to roll up on him at the stadium if he needs to. He's flying out to Oklahoma to serve Joe Harris in person. But then like at midnight, Valiance's attorneys emailed Ted and said, actually change of plans. We will accept service for Joe Harris. So the bounty the bounty hunt for Joe ended anticlimactically. But yeah, so I mean, we were just geared up to, to go to trial. And we just, Dillbeck had just continued to honestly creep out Ted and Alex. He was creep. It was like, when I say creepy, just did not get the sense that they were dealing with someone who was ethical, dealing with someone who was independent at all, unbiased at all. And this fear set in that this guy was willing to trick a jury, that this was going to be trickery and sleight of hand to secure this conviction if he needed to. And so we filed a motion to disqualify D.H. Dillbeck, to basically ask the judge to intervene and rule that D.H. Dillbeck could not continue to prosecute the case.
And do you win that motion?
Well, the United States fires back, and they are pissed. They send back this scathing motion. And they were like, and then the judge ordered us to reply, which is kind of weird. Sometimes it's it kind of goes along as long as the attorneys want it to go on, and then the judge ordered us to respond. Well, we included our response where I had dug up an Instagram photo of D.H. Dillbeck drinking Moscow Mules with his next door neighbor, who was another board member of Valiance Bank. And we mentioned this in our, reply brief or whatever. And so we show up at this docket call hearing. So these guys fly to Oklahoma City. We're getting ready for the trial to start in a week. And it's kind of scheduling and logistics. And Judge Bernard Jones finishes all the other cases, and he's like, hey, I get motions in this court that are a lot of ado about nothing. And he's like, this is not nothing. We're like, okay, seems pretty interested in this. Well, meanwhile, the supervisor, the supervising AUSA, this woman named Jessica Perry, that I looked in her eyes and saw more evil in her eyes than any offender I saw in the U.S. Marshals. I mean, this woman truly had just those offenders at the U.S. Marshals all had reasons for being the way that they were and what they were accused of. She had none of those excuses, but 200% of the evil that any of those people had. And so she saunters into court. She's watching this whole thing unfold. And the judge starts asking questions. And our attorney, my attorney said, and it's not just one relationship, it's more than one relationship with this bank. And the judge says, yes, you raised that. I want to know more about that. And Dillbeck's like, yeah, judge, and I don't remember exactly, I'm scratching my head too. And you would have thought in that moment, he didn't know this other board member. Judge, these guys are crazy. Had this tone about him. And we were like, well, listen, we didn't want to embarrass him by including this photo of these guys drinking Moscow Mules. And then Dillbeck goes, yeah, we were hanging out together. We were next door neighbors. And the judge was like, what? And Alex is like, Judge, did you see that? And Jessica Perry, just little short black hair, little beady black eyes, just sits up in her chair and just starts just shooting lasers, out of this courtroom. And so the judge starts asking for Department of Justice policy. And Dillbeck literally looks like he has seen a ghost. I mean, he's just standing there, just what has just happened. And his co-counsel is sinking down into her chair. And Jessica Perry's slamming her phone down and furiously writing down notes. Well, Alex Little just starts quoting the Department of Justice manual, the manual for how, for ethics, just chapter and verse. And I mean, he's just rattling it off, just out of his mind. And anyway, so then the judge finally just says, hey, there's really no precedent for this. I don't have any precedent to follow, but it's very concerning. I'm going to have to take this under advisement, and et cetera. And so he adjourns, and Jessica Perry walks up to the U.S. attorney's table and slams her phone and her notebook down and starts screaming. She points at Alex. She goes, I don't know who the fuck he thinks he is, quoting our fucking justice manual. And I mean, just like so out of control, like so out of control. And she practically grabs Dilbeck by the ear and is just like to the bat cave. And, they got those little wooden doors, that kind of separate the court. And I mean, those fly open and there's this, like retired U.S. Marshal just like sitting there. I mean, we're both doing like the baby Yoda thing of like, what on earth just happened? And I mean, I can hear her screaming. It's like echoing down the hallway. And so we leave and we're like, man, that was crazy. Like, I don't know. I mean, I guess we'll see how he rules. And I mean, maybe he will, maybe he won't. Like it's unprecedented. Like there's like not a lot of precedent for disqualifying a prosecutor because normally prosecutors don't toe that line. Like they recuse themselves. They don't try to walk up as close to the line of ethics as they possibly can and not cross over it. And so the next day I get this phone call from Ted and he can't even get the words out. He's just like, the judge disqualified him. The judge, I mean, we couldn't even believe it. And I mean, and he literally in his order, Judge Bernard Jones' order was like, at docket call, Dilbeck initially denied knowing Blair Humphreys, this other board member, but later, admitted with more after being presented with more information, admitted that the two had been neighbors. And the government responded to that and said, basically, we respect your decision, but please rewrite your motion. He didn't really like deny knowing him. Can you like soften that a little bit? And the judge is like, denied. I will not. And so Dilbeck's gone. I mean, terminated. Like he's gone. He can't, walled off. He is zapped from this case.
So how does that affect your case?
Well, so unbeknownst to us, there was already a trial that was scheduled when we thought we were going to go. And so the trial got reset to October, but Alex had a brutal trial schedule. So like Alex had a federal trial in Nashville just weeks prior. He had my federal trial. He had a trial out in Washington State for this humongous cryptocurrency case out in Washington State. And so it became October, and then October became December. And so we were just getting ready for it. I mean, it was just reset the whole thing. And so all of our expert witnesses, our auditors, everybody, we just reset the whole thing for December, the first week of December. But then the new prosecutor, there's a new prosecutor, Danielle London, which I gave her a shout out the last time I talked about this. I'm going to give her a shout out again. Danielle London, shout out to you for doing the right thing. I know it couldn't have been easy. I know you had to probably have a mountain of resistance for doing it, but thank you for saving the taxpayers' money and saving me and my attorneys the burden of having to go win this thing at trial, which we were prepared to do. But Danielle London reaches out to one of my attorneys and is like, hey, hadn't been a lot of plea discussions in this case. I'm like, yeah, well, it's kind of due to me telling you. She's like, what's the deal? And so they basically were just like, hey, like Mr. Bloom's not pleading. He didn't commit a crime. He's never going to plead. Like you won't, you put a sword to his neck and you won't get his signature on a piece of paper that he committed a crime. And we'd like to explain that to you if you are willing and able to dismiss this case. And so she thought about it, whatever, got back with them. They laid out some ground rules. So Ted and Alex fly back out to Oklahoma City. And hey, listen, that is a private jet charter, okay? Because you do not want to pay those guys to be stuck in the airport in Dallas. So I could pick those guys. And it was just crazy. Like I'm working, I'm on a Teams call for work. And then I like go pick them up from the airport, take them to the U.S. Attorney's office that is in the same building as the bank. Not weird at all. And then pick them up, feed them Chick-fil-A and drop them back off and go back to work, doing my normal job. But they basically just showed up in Oklahoma City and just went through these transactions one by one. And here's the evidence. Here's the artifacts. Here's, everything. Here's where, Dilbeck has got this wrong, got this wrong, got this wrong, got this wrong, got this wrong. It's just plain as day. And so then they went silent for like 3 weeks. And then on a Friday morning, I just got pulled into a conference call with the attorneys, and they're just like, hey, they're going to dismiss your case. It's good news. Bad news, if you will. There's some conditions to it. So there's this thing called a pretrial diversion. They don't have to say they lost the case. They get to say that they resolved it with a diversion. But just so you know, multi-million-dollar fraud cases don't get resolved with diversions. It's basically like a conditional dismissal. They'll dismiss this case. You know, it gets dismissed now, and they can never prosecute you for it. But that flips if you break any of these conditions. And it's like, have a job, pay a token amount of restitution that's mostly symbolic. You don't plead to anything. So you don't plead, you don't plead guilty. You have to write a statement taking responsibility. And so I wrote a statement taking responsibility for not getting enough guidance in the implementation of this program that resulted in a civil breach of contract. Because that's all this ever was. This was a contract case. And so I pled to nothing. If you ran a background check on me right now, it would say the case was dismissed because it was. The judge dismissed all the charges. And, as long as I don't, commit any federal crimes for another, year or so, which is easy for me to do because I have never committed one before, then they can't. They can't. So it's like the underlying case is dismissed without prejudice, but we now have a agreement in place that I can never be prosecuted for, this alleged scheme, if you will. And kind of just as quickly as it came, it went away.
How much do you think you spent on legal fees total?
Oh, between attorney fees, private investigators, expert witnesses, forensics, oh my gosh, over 500,000.
That's crazy.
Yeah, over 500,000, which wiped out all the equity in our house. It's like that's why we're selling the house so that I can. Because right now I'm paying interest until the house sells. I'm paying interest, to these family members who borrowed from their retirement, But yeah, it wiped out every bit of equity I had I have nothing. I have a paycheck, and my family obviously is they couldn't take my family to begin with. So it felt scary at the time, but looking back, it's just well, they were never going to take my family. They were never going to take my wife. They were never going to take my kids. They were never going to take my parents. So, it was so awful. It was just a weight. Just hanging over every moment. My daughter had a birthday. Will I be around for the next one? Will I be around when she graduates high school? We've got 2 kids that we adopted, and they're just the most incredible young men that are just going to do so much great for this world. But with that, we're trauma-informed parents, and we carry a humongous amount of parenting workload, especially with just 4 kids that close in age. And just the thought that someone would, imprisoning me would have truly permanently crippled at least 2 of our children, and it would have left a nasty scar on our whole family for years, over a case that never should have been brought.
Do you think you could have achieved the same result with a public defender?
I've thought about it. So it's kind of wild. This just happened. There's a case in Oklahoma right now where a business owner was just convicted this week of defrauding the state out of millions of dollars by overcharging on improvements to the state parks. And what stuck out to me was his defense counsel was completely unprepared, didn't properly notice the witness and expert witnesses they intended to call. They didn't have this guy testify, which I think was a huge mistake. I was fully ready to testify. I had you don't like rehearse. Well, you went to trial.
Mhm.
You don't rehearse this, this question and this answer. But I mean, I spent hours and hours and hours just working on cross and direct examination and getting in the flow of answering questions. Because I was fully prepared to testify. Like, I think if they'd have said, no, we don't want you to, I'd be like, no, I'm calling my number. Like, get me in there. Probably would have blown up in my face. But no, and I mean, I always wanted to talk about it. I wanted to talk about it in the car. I was like, why are you taking me downtown to an arraignment? Let's go to your office and I'll explain this to you. And so anyway, so this guy just gets his butt kicked. I mean, just gets convicted immediately, but they couldn't get their expert witness on, called up a witness and abruptly ended questioning, and it just was ineffective and weird. Called some other witness up and asked some weird tangential question that just like kind of caught everybody off guard, and then rested. You're like, this multi-million-dollar case just ended with, this guy's defense attorney just kind of, I mean, it was like, it was like cringy for me to like be sort of watching this unfold on X, these updates, like, what is going on here? Is this guy, is this guy new? And so I definitely think that if you're going to go try to win a federal trial, man, you've got to have some firepower. And, could the public defender's office, I mean, they've got the resources. They win appellate. I mean, they win appeals. The guy that was coming after me, D.H. Dillbeck, he had a case overturned on appeal at the 10th Circuit. I mean, the public defender's office, I honestly think a public defender would be better than one of these attorneys that's just trying to take as many cases as he can at a time and put as little effort into each one and just wants to kind of show up and hope that he can kind of, riz up the jury in closing arguments.
What happened to him, the U.S. attorney?
The assistant U.S. attorney,
Yeah.
D.H. Dillbeck? Nothing.
He's still employed?
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, I keep up on Pacer Monitor. I keep up with his cases. I mean, it was interesting. He had a case that just got sentenced last week. The guy charges this daycare owner with 5 counts of fraud related, broadly to federal program fraud. And he has to dismiss 2 of them before the trial even starts. They're down to 3 counts. And she goes to trial. She loses on the 3 counts. But then, he wants like, I don't know, $800,000 in restitution and sentencing exposure for these 3 counts. And her defense counsel argues that there's no loss for 2 of the counts, and they go back and forth, and he keeps lowering his number after, and finally in the end, this lady goes to trial, loses, gets sentenced to like a year and a little over $200,000 in restitution on a case that this guy indicted in the millions. And it's just like, it kind of undercuts my feelings that this is kind of this like, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of soft corruption deal. I'm like, maybe you're just a really terrible prosecutor. Like, you might just be really bad at this, because like what a waste of resources to put that much effort and energy into thinking you got a big case and, in reality, you have little case. But I don't know. I mean, he lost a jury trial earlier this year. Actually, in the time that I've been watching in the Western District of Oklahoma, they've had 3 jury acquittals. I mean, it's just, they're not, I don't know. I mean, someone who would know says they've had more jury acquittals in the last 3 years than the 30 prior to that. I mean, it is just, it's just been there's a huge flight of experience, and, there's no parental supervision over there. The appointed U.S. attorney is not particularly effective. And, you've just got a few prosecutors in there that know what they're doing, and you've got a bunch of other ones that have, the bazooka of the federal machine, and they just spray and pray on people. And, it's incredibly wasteful. I mean, I just think about how much money was wasted on this case, that all he had to do, all D.H. Dillbeck had to do, all any non-reckless AUSA had to do is send me a target letter. Send me the target letter you send every other white-collar defendant. I'd have lawyered up. I'd have come in there. I just shown him the deck that his coworkers saw, and he just said, "Yeah, this isn't a case." But once you indict the thing, how do you put an indictment? How do you just put the indictment back in?
Why do you think you had to go through this, looking back on it now?
Why did I have to ask that question again?
Why do you have to go through this?
From a personal development standpoint, I have dealt with mental health my entire life from the time I was in 4th grade. And it's just always been, I've always had mental health challenges. And I would have told you that if my business ever failed, I'd go find a concrete bridge abutment like Aubrey McClendon did. And what was incredible was throughout that entire time, I had purpose. I had a reason to continue. I was not suicidal. I was not dark. I was gritty and resilient and purposeful. And as a result, now, again, going back to, I carried with me this whole time a faith in God. But here's the thing about God. He doesn't promise you won't go to federal prison. Every single, most of his followers and apostles in the Bible spent a lot of time in prison. Most of the Bible was written from a prison. There's no promises you won't go to prison. There's no promises that, well, yeah, if you do good over here and you take care of these kids over here that God's going to make it up over here. That's not how that works. But God does promise that he's going to be with you in prison, that God will be there and at the camp in El Reno that's 30 minutes from my house. He'll be there with the kids. He'll be there with my wife. And so you think you got a grip on that. You think you know that. But I promise you, until you are staring down the barrel of United States of America versus your name, it was not real to me. And it's very real to me now. And so now I find myself in situations where I'm stressed out. Whatever happens that would have plunged me into darkness at any other point in my life. And I'm just like this gritty, resilient, battle-tested warrior. And I didn't feel brave. I felt like I was doing the things that any other rational person would do. I didn't feel like I was just brave. It was like, what do you mean brave? I didn't want to go to prison. This is survival. It felt like instinct of survival. But I look back now and I'm like, okay, I didn't fold. I didn't bend. I didn't give in. I did what was right. Did I come on some podcasts and try to shine a light on some really, really awful things that some people have done? Yeah, I did that. But in the name of accountability, in the name of inspiring other people that you can beat the feds, and in the name of, hey, in the most imperfect way, the most imperfect person who, the chips were down for, God was there for us in those moments. And so why did I go through it? I went through it to prove to myself that I can get through anything and that the business didn't define me. The indictment didn't define me. Even the victory doesn't define me. I'm defined by who I am. I think about what did my kids see? Did they saw mom and dad just getting up and just throwing haymakers all day long, outside, not at each other. So I don't know. Why did I go through that? That's a good one. I haven't been asked that one yet.
Well, Ryan, I appreciate you coming on the show today, man. This was a great interview.
Well, I appreciate you having me on.
And I wish you the best in the future and everything you have going on.
Yeah. No, it's exciting. I mean, we've got teenagers to raise. We've got projects to build at work, and it's just slow rebuild, slow rebound, and just try to build back differently, but also just build back, just surrounding myself with just running away from people that are slimy. Like, I'd been warned that Stephen Osborne was a slime ball, by his family. I'd been warned, like, you've been warned about people and you think, well, if I do the right thing, or I'm over here and I do the right, that I'll be okay. But, what happens is it ends up that there's kind of this scapegoat. And it's like, well, hey guys, we all drew straws and you're the scapegoat for kind of this big mess. And, we're going to kind of put all this on you. And so it's like, just golly, get out of any situation that's going to have a scapegoat in the end, and just surround yourself with complete integrity, unimpeachable integrity. Run away from self-help, run away from creativity, run away from the gray area. Just stick to, just fly up here, and then it's hard for them to just drag you down,
Absolutely. Well, thank you again. Safe travels back.
Yeah, thanks.
Awesome.